Welcome to PM Ready, your guide to becoming PMP certified. This is the lesson on Manage Project Knowledge. This lesson covers the Lessons Learned Register and the Lessons Learned Repository and how they relate to each other. The different types of knowledge, explicit and tacit, the factors that affect knowledge sharing, and the differences between knowledge management and information management. The Manage Project Knowledge process is part of the Executing Process group and the Integration Management Knowledge area. It's a new process that was introduced to place emphasis on the importance of managing project knowledge. The primary output of Manage Project Knowledge is the Lessons Learned Register. Manage Project Knowledge is the process of using existing knowledge and creating new knowledge, with the primary objectives of achieving the project's objectives as well as contributing to your organization's learning. It's easy to confuse the Lessons Learned Register with the Lessons Learned Repository, so hopefully this will help. The Lessons Learned Register is specific to only your project, whereas the Lessons Learned Repository is an organizational process asset that is kept in the organization and used by multiple projects and updated at the end of each project. As you can see from this cycle, when you start a project and when you're managing a project, many of the processes use information from the Lessons Learned Repository. Once a project gets started, it starts generating its own lessons learned, which are recorded in the Lessons Learned Register. Then, when you go through the close project or phase process, you take those project-level lessons learned from the Lessons Learned Register and you update the Lessons Learned Repository of your organization with these lessons learned. Knowledge can be categorized into two categories: explicit knowledge and tacit knowledge. And as a project manager, you need to learn to manage both types of knowledge. Explicit knowledge is the kind of information that's easy to put into your Lessons Learned Register. Information that is easily codified into words, pictures, and numbers, analysis, reports, charts, all of that sort of thing. However, explicit knowledge can lack the context necessary to properly understand it, so it can be easily misunderstood or misapplied. Tacit knowledge is that kind of personal information that comes from experience. It's the know-how and insights and even beliefs of people. Tacit knowledge is difficult to record in something like a Lessons Learned Register. It's more commonly shared through conversations and interactions with people in more informal settings. Managing project knowledge is about much more than just recording and sharing your lessons learned in some sort of knowledge base or something. It involves making sure that your skills and experience and expertise from different team members and experts are used during, before, and after the project. In order to make sure that this kind of knowledge sharing happens, you need to create an environment of trust, which motivates people not only to share what they know with others, but also to listen to and apply what they learn from others. Let me give you an example. When Steve Jobs designed the new Pixar headquarters, everything about the new headquarters was designed to encourage people to meet and mingle and communicate, to enhance people's ability to work together. He focused on removing perceived barriers, such as having stairs that are open. He also designed it with a single entrance, so that people can see each other coming and going all day. Meeting rooms and other gathering spaces are all in the center of the building, with the express purpose of encouraging people running into each other unexpectedly, resulting in the kind of ad hoc, informal meetings and discussions that build relationships and encourage communication and knowledge sharing, especially tacit knowledge. As a project manager, you usually won't have so much control over the environment, but you can use techniques such as co-location so that people do have more opportunities for these kinds of chance encounters that help to share tacit knowledge. All sorts of small and more involved team-building activities can also be used to help build relationships and share knowledge. So go ahead and get creative with different ways in which you can encourage people to interact with each other. In order to manage project knowledge, including not only recording information, but knowing who has what to share and how to encourage them to share and listen, you need to learn who's who on your project team and understand your stakeholders. Your project team assignments and resource breakdown structure are some valuable inputs to help you learn who's who, what their skills and experience are, what their interests are, and so on. Also, your stakeholder register with information about your stakeholders. Other inputs include your project management plan, including all of its different components, and in particular, those parts about how you'll manage project knowledge. All of your project's deliverables, and even your lessons learned register, which could include information about what has and hasn't worked as far as trying to manage project information and get people to share this information. Enterprise environmental factors that can affect your managed project knowledge process include organizational, stakeholder, and customer culture. It's especially important to have an environment of trust in which there is no blame and people feel safe sharing information. An environment that encourages learning, and social behavioral norms that encourage the sharing of information without fear of reprisal. The geographic distribution of your facilities and resources can have a significant effect, especially when it comes to tacit learning. If people are located on different floors or in different buildings or in different cities or different countries, it's especially difficult to get the kind of tacit knowledge sharing that you want. And you'll need to be proactive and careful in selecting other tools and techniques, including technology, that can help you to encourage this kind of interaction. Next, you have organizational knowledge experts. And it's interesting that this is listed here. Normally, expert judgment is listed as a tool and technique, but in this case, it's also listed as an enterprise environmental factor. You will also have, in some cases, legal and regulatory requirements that can constrain how you share information, especially when it comes to personal, confidential information and the rules for retaining such information and then disposing of it at appropriate times. When it comes to managing project knowledge, you'll need to follow your organization's standards and policies and processes and procedures when it comes to information, specifically confidentiality that needs to be maintained for sensitive information, how access to that information is controlled, security and data protection, the record retention policies that you have for your organization, many of which are driven by legal and regulatory requirements, how you dispose of information when you're done with it, including destruction of classified or sensitive information after a certain time period based on the retention schedule, as well as what specific technologies you should and should not be using to keep this information safe. You also have personnel administration that's specific to your organization, including employee development and training records, keeping their information about training and mentoring up to date in your organizational records. Your organization may also have certain communication requirements. Formal requirements can be useful for sharing information, and informal communication requirements are more useful for creating new knowledge and helping to integrate the knowledge of various individuals. And there are also formal knowledge sharing and information sharing procedures that may be part of your organization's standards and policies. Tools and techniques of the managed project knowledge process start with expert judgment, particularly those experts that have knowledge and skills regarding information management, knowledge management, and so on. Next on the list comes information management, which is about managing that explicit knowledge. Then knowledge management, which is different from information management, which is focused more on tacit knowledge. And then interpersonal and team skills. And we'll go through each of these last three in a little bit more detail. Information management is about managing explicit knowledge. Its purpose is to create and connect people to information. The kind of information that's readily stored in something like a lessons learned register or lessons learned repository or other form of knowledge base or other documentation. Tools and techniques that are useful in information management include different methods and methodologies for recording knowledge, library services that can be used to store and retrieve information in an orderly fashion, information gathering and research, doing online searches or searching through the most recent journals that are specific to your industry. Your project management information system is another tool that's very useful for information management, particularly systems such as document management systems or knowledge bases. It's also useful to include tools that encourage interaction between those that have this knowledge and those that are looking for it, and to provide some kind of support, such as some way for people looking for information to contact those that have this information. However, the best way to really take information and make use of it is to embed what you've learned into improving your processes and procedures and making actual changes to your organizational process assets that incorporate what you've learned and improve your business practices going forward. Knowledge management, on the other hand, is about managing tacit knowledge. Its purpose is to connect people to each other in order to work together and create new knowledge, share tacit knowledge, and integrate this knowledge from different people. It can include tools and techniques such as networking of all different types, including face-to-face and ad hoc meetings, as well as online ways of connecting and networking with each other. It can include communities of practice, special interest groups and guilds, people that share common interests getting together to share knowledge, tacit knowledge in particular. Work shadowing is another good technique in which you can observe how someone does their job, and by doing this, learn things that would be difficult to simply document or learn from procedure manuals. Online discussion forums and focus groups can also provide useful areas for sharing tacit knowledge, as can traditional conferences and workshops. Even storytelling and other forms of training or mentoring is another great way to share tacit knowledge. And, least but not least, you have co-location, which is an excellent tool for bringing people together so that they can connect and have these impromptu meetings and information sharing. Some of the interpersonal and team skills that are useful in managing project knowledge include active listening, which is very involved, but at its core is about understanding and being understood. Facilitation, in which you guide a group to a decision or solution or conclusion. Leadership skills, specifically communicating a vision and inspiring people to reach for that vision. Networking, which is about establishing connections and relationships with people. And finally, political awareness, which guides you in how you can communicate and share information in your particular organization and environment. The outputs of the Manage Project Knowledge process are primarily the Lessons Learned Register, which is created by this process and then updated and consulted in many different processes. The Manage Project Knowledge process can result in the need for updates to just about any component of your project management plan, as well as just about any of your organizational process assets. Ideally, you'll be able to use information and embed these changes into your policies, procedures, and processes, even your templates, and also knowledge bases and things like training manuals and online courses. Okay, now it's time for a quick quiz. How much do you remember of the inputs, tools and techniques, and outputs of Manage Project Knowledge? Let's start with the outputs. The main output is the Lessons Learned Register, which is created by this process and updated and consulted by many other processes. Then you can have updates to your project management plan, to just about any component, as well as any of your organizational process assets. Your inputs include your project management plan, various project documents, including your Lessons Learned Register, project team assignments, resource breakdown structure, and stakeholder register, places where you can learn about who's who and who's doing what and what their skills and knowledge are, the lessons you've learned, information about deliverables, and your enterprise environmental factors and organizational process assets. Your tools and techniques are expert judgment, knowledge management, and information management. Remember that one is for tacit knowledge and one is for explicit knowledge. Plus your interpersonal and team skills of active listening, facilitation, leadership, networking, and political awareness. Agile has some nice advantages when it comes to managing project knowledge, especially tacit knowledge. First of all, you have short iterations, which allows you to have frequent reviews of your work and how well things are going. You also have retrospectives, meetings in which you address 3 basic questions. In the last iteration, what has gone well, what has not gone so well, and what can we do to improve? Are there things that we can do to change? Are there policies and procedures that could be changed that would help us to be more productive? Or are there some impediments that upper management can help to remove so that we can be a more productive team? You also have your daily stand-ups, which allow for a certain amount of daily knowledge sharing, in which team members share what they're working on and what some of their challenges are, which opens up the opportunity for some sharing of knowledge and information. And then there's the classic of co-location, which by putting people close together allows for more constant opportunities for sharing tacit knowledge through all of these unexpected encounters. And also by making it convenient for people to ask questions of other team members. A few key points to remember from this lesson. The Lessons Learned Register is specifically for your project. The Lessons Learned Repository is part of the organizational process assets that includes information from lessons learned registers from previous projects. There are two types of knowledge, explicit and tacit. Explicit is that kind of information that's easy to codify or write down and share in some way, such as in a lessons learned register or repository. Tacit knowledge is that kind of knowledge that is more based on your experience and is difficult to simply write down, but is easier to share face-to-face with someone or to show someone how it's done. It's important to be aware of the factors that affect knowledge sharing because you should be proactive in helping to improve your knowledge sharing using things such as creating an environment of trust. And understand the difference between information management, which is about the management of explicit knowledge, and knowledge management, which is the management of tacit knowledge. For more information, you can refer to these pages in the PMBOK guide. PM Ready is a publication of PM Guaranteed and is based on the Project Management Institute's PMBOK guide.